This is a recording of the November 5, 2022 Saturday morning video meet of the NMRA/PCR Coast Division.
Welcome all. This is the Saturday, November 5th meeting of the NMRA Coast Division. And we're going to kick off today actually with Frank Markovich with kind of an NMRA and PCR update. So over to you, Frank.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. I'll be talking to you later anyway on the constant contact thing. I have three things very quickly. On the auction that's coming up, I'm going to be bringing Eric Bracker from Rio Grande Models gave me a whole lot of trucks as a donation to the PCR/Coast Division, and I will have them at the auction on a separate table somewhere. And I'm thinking that I'll charge $5 a pair, and all the money will be split between the Coast Division and the PCR. So that there's a lot of trucks. I think there's probably close to 100 sets, maybe a little more. So that's the first thing. The second thing is more timely. On Wednesday at 7 o'clock, I've sent out a notice. I'll send out another one. Chris Palermo, who's a NMRA Director, will be doing a Zoom call with us, and people in the PCR can ask him many questions. He is more than willing to talk, particularly about the dues increase and about the way the NMRA magazine is online and things like that. And we've already talked. And I know a number of people in the PCR have asked me about the dues increase, and he'll be able to answer. And also some members have had trouble getting on the NMRA site for the back issues, which I'm really enjoying. So those are the first two things. And the third thing's really timely, and one of the reasons I need to leave. There's a RAC, Regional Advisory Committee meeting at noon, and it's all the PCR, all the NMRA presidents of the regions and some of the directors. And the reason I'm bringing this up is if anybody has anything they'd like to bring up, I've got a couple things for that group. It's a fairly long meeting. Last time I left after 2.5 hours. Usually it's about 2 hours. Anyway, if you have items you'd like me to bring up, please do. I'm already going to bring up some things about recruitment and retention. And if there's anything else any of you want, you can email me or bring it up right now, and I'll talk about it at the meeting. This happens once a quarter. All the presidents, all the NMRA presidents of each region get together, and we discuss issues relating to the organization. Okay, guess nobody has anything.
Everything's going well. No,
oh, good.
Everything's perfect.
Good. Any of you going to join on Wednesday? Talking to Chris?
What time is it?
7 o'clock.
Let's see.
I'll be sending out something through Constant Contact.
Yeah, try to join. That's actually a conflict time for me and some others, but that's maybe we can try for an hour or so.
Okay.
So
I've got a conflict.
Yeah.
Got another committee meeting.
Well, Tuesday, there's 2 meetings on conventions, one on the one coming up in Sacramento, and one on having a single site that we use for 3 or 4 years. If anybody that's to try and save money, lock down room cost and total cost of convention. So people have issues with that, plus or minus, let me know. Just if we did go that route, and I'm not saying we will, it would most likely be in the Sierra division because it's sort of central, maybe somewhere between Modesto and Sacramento. And so if you have issues with that, please email me or one of the committee members. Okay, well, that's all I have. Thank you, and have a good Zoom call.
Thanks, Frank. So anyway, let's jump back in, just as to update, as Frank indicated, where we have the auction coming up. So the Coast auction is planned for Sunday, December 4th. It's at the Mastic Senior Center in Alameda. So hopefully everybody will be able to make it for that. I've been talking to Paul Newitt, and he's the author of Creative Effects for Your Model Railroad, and planning on have him do a clinic on automation and hopefully have some of his books to give away. So that should be interesting if you're interested in how to do automation on your railroad. So with that, we really, for this week, this is really just a social discussion and show what you've been modeling, and kind of a quiet, we don't have a planned clinic. I believe we're going to have Earl in 2 weeks, reprising his clinic from our September 25th meeting. He's probably going to redo it live on Zoom, just because we had enough audio issues on the 25th that we thought it would be better to do it that way. So basically with that, I'll just throw it back to everyone and just have an open discussion, kind of continue discussion, Robert, about your layout, or anybody else have anything else they'd like to bring up? It's a quiet day.
Very quiet day.
To say anything. I just had one thing. We can start with what I've been working on, which is the structure. Let's see if we can get this up there. This little building is actually the blacksmith shop behind the Port Costa roundhouse. And for the last week or so, I've just been I have had a what we call a mock-up sitting there for the last couple of years, more probably 18, 19 months. And I finally decided it was a simple, small project to work on, as I'm sort of starting to go through each of the mock-up buildings I have behind the roundhouse, and build more accurate models of them, actual models of them. This
Cool.
is the interesting thing about this is you notice the board and batten siding on it. It was a rather unusual thing, because SP tended to favor novelty, but somehow around 1900, buildings that were built for the locomotive service were built with board and batten. And there are two buildings at Port Costa. One was the sand house, and the other was the blacksmith shop. The board and batten is a wider version than is available from either Plastruct or Evergreen. So I have had to make it myself, and I don't know, you probably can't see the boards and batten here, using a 10-inch by 1-inch strip styrene, a scale 10-inch by 1-inch strip styrene with a batten that's a 2x4. this is as close as I could get to matching the look. I originally had no idea what the siding was on the blacksmith shop until I just recently came across was sent a picture by Tim O'Connor from Boston. And it actually showed a very nice color photo of the back of the roundhouse. Created a whole lot of work for me. Anyway, that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, Phil, maybe just to follow up a little bit on what I'm doing on my layout. I just, I can't say enough how useful it is to actually operate on other layouts to get a sense of, you know, how that might affect your design. And then to have folks over and get their feedback on what you're doing and what they might suggest. As I said, I'm building out a yard right now, and so Earl actually got me to operate on Ted Stevens's again, but be the yard master, and it was challenging, but it was really it was a fun thing to do. But I also got a lot of good just experience and that I can apply to how I might modify my layout. I had what I thought was a pretty good design, and I think it mostly is. But you know, just having I decided I needed a second AD track. That was just going to be important, as well as a little bit more storage. So you know, just kind of interacting with other people, getting their ideas is just so beneficial to actually building a layout. And maybe at some point I'll give a little bit of an update with some visuals on what I'm doing. For those that don't know, I'm modeling the CNO circa 1950 or so New River Allegheny districts.
Excellent. Yeah, the other thing about that is that the groups.io RIOPS, you know, you can put things in there and ask for feedback, get very interesting feedback from that group, you know, or the LD SIG that's coming up in end of January.
Yeah, I have interacted with them. I think what was the meeting we had in Sacramento?
Yep.
I got some feedback from those guys early on.
Super.
It's interesting how many CNO, BNO modelers we have in the Bay Area. And, you know, there's quite a few of them. And I think that's interesting. Andy Schnurr's layout, of course, is really good if anyone has seen that one. And then, of course, David Park's layout just blows your socks off. It's just absolutely fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah, Andy's is really top notch. Yeah, I've seen both Andy and David, and yeah, marvelous stuff.
Yeah, they really do a great job on BNO, CNO. Well, I guess I can tell a couple of stories. It's not modeling stories, but last weekend, the San Leandro Club had its annual Halloween show. Of course, it was the first one in 2 years. And my wife just had her knee replaced. And I'm sort of in charge of the outdoor layout. It's called the G&O, because we have both G gauge and O gauge 3-rail outdoors. And so an hour before the show, I'd go down there, and the other guys had set up all the ghouls and goblins and everything else around the layout. It was really nicely decorated, but not a single train was running. It's really, I mean, you get down there and you go in the day before, you test the trains, everything works fine. You get down just before a show. Lots of stress just to get the trains running. I don't know why this always seems to happen, but it does on shows. Also, they have become the membership chair for for the O-Scale Kings, which is no longer in business. It's called O-Scale Central. And we are trying to promote O-scale 2 rail, interest in it and so forth. And we're going to be hopefully to have hold some events or at least meetings of O-scale modelers, and it doesn't matter whether you're O-gauge narrow gauge or O-gauge 3 rail or O-gauge 2 rail sometime early next year. And there's going to be the O-scale National is in Denver next year in June, and that's going to be a really terrific show too. One of the members of O-scale Central is Michelle Campana. She's the executive director of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Greeley, which is a 5,000 square foot HO layout. And she's going to be giving a tour of that layout. So that'll be really great. And if you've seen in Model Railroader magazine, David Park's layout, which is an O-scale 2 rail layout, some 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, just fabulous modeling. That's going to be on tour too during the show in Denver. So that's all I have to offer if anyone's interested.
Cool. I think Joe and I were talking about trying to have something at the Pleasanton O-scale group at some point, so that hopefully can come together.
Yeah, have a meeting of O-scale modelers and run at the Pleasanton group or
Right.
out at State Club.
Anyone else have anything interesting that you want to talk about? So I guess coming back to Jesse, what you were talking about. So I was showing you a couple of photos. This is that idea of doing photo backdrops or photo building drops. So this was actually what that area looked like beforehand. And so this was what we did with flats. So each one of these was something found on the internet, actually produced on a huge Microsoft PowerPoint slide that was, I think the Microsoft Power Slide goes to 56 inches wide as a slide, and then set the height. So when you printed a PNG image of it, it would come out to 60 inches by 20 inches. And you get those printed for 20 bucks at Costco. So basically a set of building flats like this, you get two of these, this set in one $20 print, and it's just mounted to hardboard. And so this is basically, just cutting it out and getting it ready to mount. And then this is kind of what it looked like when it got done. So you can kind of see, the most of these are just flats, but like the building that's here, this building is actually, you'll see, is 3-sided and actually has some effect. And then this building is also 2-sided, which leads down to the theater, which is kind of across the way and looks like it's down the street when you look at it. The downside you can see in this picture, which is there's some lights up at the front that kind of reflect off it. You get at the wrong angles, but there's kind of another view of it. This is kind of a view when you look back from the other side, which is where it's more rural, more mountainy, looking back towards the city. So kind of works out really well. It's pretty, I think to do that whole area was, I think, 200 bucks.
Say,
for all the
Phil,
print.
Phil, let me ask you a quick question about the light reflection. Could you not spray this with one of those matte things, the matte spray?
They were sprayed with that, but you still get a little reflection, even though there was.
Okay.
And but here's the thing: is you got it there because it was a really low angle. When you look at it from the front, you don't really see it because the lights are high enough. I mean, it's the angle of the lights that hit it. If you look at that picture where you saw the reflection, it turns out it was taken from a very low angle where you can see the reflection more. And if you notice, it was. Hang on, let me get it back there. Let me pull it up. So Oh, I closed it. Here, hang on. That was my mistake. I of course closed the window that I had open there. Now I got to go find it again.
I think it looks very effective.
Yeah, I was
think it's-
amazed.
I
I
think it
was
looks great.
amazed at how well it came out for, it was one of those things that I'd been coming before I joined for years, and then as a member, and it just was a real eyesore. So
Oh, it definitely looks terrific.
And since there are pictures of real buildings, I mean, it can't get more authentic.
yep. Well, some of them were not real. Some of them were kind of more, I think, created on the internet, but they actually came out pretty well even then. So this is the problem with having too many pictures.
Well, I only have 35,000 on mine.
I got something after you're done, Phil.
No, go ahead, because I'm going to take me a second to find this picture and I can come back. Or
You
not.
can enable participant screen sharing.
I certainly will. I'm sorry I did not do that earlier. I keep forgetting that.
It's all
set.
great. So I'm going to be modeling the North Pacific Coast Railway, but in the short term, let me get to the start of this. In the short term, I'm actually modeling a single module that's a test module, so I can learn how to. I started doing a module of Occidental, and having not done any model railroading in 25 years, it was way too big of a goal. 8 switches, a turntable, tons of complex structures. So I decided to sort of back down. There'd been some articles in Model Railroader by Pete. I forget his last name. Is a Swedish guy, Schosberg. Yeah, who does these, like, model something just simple and try to do it right. And so I decided I had a goal to do a club module and a test module. So this is what the goals sort of were. I wanted a water feature. I wanted a big oak tree. I wanted a fruit shed. I also decided that I wanted a DCC controlled switch, which is no big deal. I also wanted a DCC controlled remote uncoupler, which I figured out. So the thing that I wanted, so I'm in the process of pouring water I poured the small pond already, which was a test. I'll show a picture of that in a minute. And so now I'm going to figure out how to make some sockeye salmon. I have it set up so that when this prints, they're scale size. So I have a idea of what I'm going to try to do. I know that if I did more than 1 or 2 of each of them, I would do them as in resin, and I'd probably talk Phil into letting me use his 3D printer. But since I'm only doing 1 or 2, I'm just going to carve them. I'll figure that out. So this was the scene. So I'm working on grass right now, and I have a little trestle scene, and I poured the water for that a week ago. It went really, really well. I was actually pretty pleased with that. And so I decided I wanted some grass in the canyon next to the wall, and tried shaking some onto a static mat, and it just really didn't work right next to the wall. So I decided that I would try to make sections of grass sort of like a hair weave. And so I made a little short section that was about 2 inches long, and basically gluing one end down into static tack and just pressing it down with my finger. And then I planted that next to the horse. I'm extremely proud of this picture. It's the first photograph of my module that looks like a scene of anything, that doesn't look man-made, like there isn't something glaring sitting out. The other thing is there's a transition and a gap right behind the trestle to another part of the module. So there's a place where there's a scenery transition to another sub-module that's hidden by careful placement of rock and dirt. So I ended up with this little grass. I was really excited. I can see a reflection of the horse's head in the water. I sent this to my friends. So this is the first real scenery achievement that I've had. since I re-engaged model railroading, but I liked how the grass worked. So I decided to make more. And so over the last couple of nights, this only took about 10 minutes a strip. I basically took all of the sifted grass by hand onto a large glass plate really thinly, and then I used a steel rule to sort of gather it up into a line, and then I used my fingers to pinch the line thin to about a 1/4 inch wide line of hair of grass about 12 inches long, and then I would just pinch a piece of it and pick it up and put the bottom end in the static mat. So at this point, let's see, I'll stop sharing briefly. I have a handful of grass, and I have multiple colors of grass. So I started, you can't really see it, but I started blending in the lighter color grass towards one end of 2 of the strips, because I'm going to have lighter color going to blonde grass. And as somebody who lives in California and knows what grass in the hills look like, I'm basically going to take this and cover a section of my module with the static grass. The other thing that I'm working on is a fruit shed design. I'm not going to go into the plans for that, but I basically found a great prototype fruit shed in Northern California. I don't know exactly where it is, but I'm drawing plans from that to make my fruit shed model. So that's the stuff that I'm working on now. I decided that I wasn't about to pop for a $200 or $300 static electronic grass thing. I don't know if anybody's used those to stand up when you shake it down. I decided that I'd give free a shot first, because I'm big on free. And so we'll see how it works. So that's what I'm working on.
Cool.
Because I sent my daughter an email, hey, I'm experimenting with grass. What do you think? And then I sent her a photo. So,
I was just looking at a book that I have. It's an old software program, which I have no idea what happened to it. But there was somebody named Evan Designs in Broomfield, Colorado, and the website said modeltrainsoftware.com. And I remember this guy. This is background buildings again. The guy had a library of building stuff, like here. Oh, you can't see this. That's ridiculous. Windows and doors and that sort of stuff. And it was, you plucked it off and you put it on something, and eventually you ended up with a building, as things. And that was a long time ago. I don't know if he's still in business or anything like that. But in terms of background buildings, it gives you, the pictures were very good. And I don't know what he did. I think he, it was photographs of stuff. And it's worth, if you want to go photographic backdrops, but you don't want to use what Walthers decides every backdrop should look like, this is another option for people.
I think he's still in business. I think he sells a lot of LEDs and stuff too.
Like I say, I was amazed that the book just happens to be on the shelf here. But I don't know what happened to the software. I think I bought it. It was I don't know what it was.
I can remember a long time ago, I bought a disc of architectural shapes and pieces.
So this is actually Evan's design. I'll put the link to this in the chat. But I think this is the software. This is the software you were talking about.
Yeah, it's
There's the
very possible.
toolkit, there's
Yeah,
model
Yeah,
builder.
I bought that.
that's right.
too.
Model building. Yeah, that's I
Yep.
think what we bought.
Yeah.
And he also has a bunch of LEDs, just as an FYI. He has an LED for fire. This fire LED kit's actually pretty nice. You know, it's some blinking LEDs kind of pre-integrated. And so,
Uh,
hey,
yeah,
like I said, I'll put the
my
link
book
up
says
in the,
Model Builder Image Library, so I guess that may be what it was called.
I remember the Brickyard stuff. Unfortunately, I don't think it worked out on a Windows machine after Windows 7.
It wouldn't be surprised.
yeah, you probably have to update it. But anyway, yeah, I put the link in the chat if anyone's interested. It's a good source for kind of specialty LEDs and things like that. So
When I
interesting
was at
source.
the NMRA in St. Louis, I met a guy named with Lark Products. I don't know whether you guys can see this, but he does backdrops and he prints them on vinyl. He has 3 options: light vinyl, heavier vinyl, and super heavy. And he'll print them practically 6 feet long or any size, buildings, landscapes, and other things. It's at larkproducts.com, LARC, and then words products.com. And his displays at the NMRA in St. Louis were absolutely spectacular with these backdrop buildings and things. So I brought his brochure back.
Yeah, I think that's that thing where you can use the panorama and get great pictures and then turn them
Yes.
into a backdrop.
Absolutely.
Where you can make your backdrop match your layout.
Mm-hmm. And I toured a couple of layouts that had effectively used these types of products, and they were really spectacular.
Yep. It's amazing how much times have changed from when you used to have to paint something yourself.
Yes. And if you were a good painter, it was great. If you
Or
were
knew
John
somebody,
Allen.
or knew somebody that was a great painter that come paint it for you.
That's right.
I did a forest, and I want to tell you that I really, in this background of my background there, I painted those, and I had a great time doing it. And I did it once, and now I'm done. But it was fun. I did oil painting when I was a mere lad, kind of when oil was new, you know what I mean? But it was a lot of fun. But you're right. I mean, it's the photo backdrops are fabulous.
Absolutely. Anyone else have anything exciting to share?
So Phil, let me ask you, I'm staring at a number of sessions, I've stared at that background photo of yours. Is that your layout?
It's actually a module.
Module, it looks fabulous. I've been staring at it, trying to see if I can find a
Thank you.
single flaw because my modeling is not up to that level, and I'm intimidated by how awesome that looks. I just got to let you know that
Oh,
it
thank
looks
you.
fabulous.
Well, the 2 flaws that are there are not really obvious. The pickup truck and the boxcar behind it are just raw out of the box. But it turns out it's photographed outside. So I took it out in the driveway and photographed it. So everything you see except for a little bit, the tree in the front there between here and the engine, and the kind of little bit of bushes right at the back of that. Everything else behind that is actual real hillside.
Yeah, it looks like the berm at the back is the edge of the mod.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the other thing I found, and this was totally through serendipity, I took it out and took a couple of pictures and looked at them. And what I realized was I had totally accidentally turned the car to the right angle. So the sun was reflecting off of the window of the car. off of the, so it turns out that when you go outside, if you look at where the sun's coming from, if you've got windows, if you turn things the right way, you get the reflection off the window. And that's something that actually I think makes things look almost more realistic, because you normally don't get that. And, in model pictures, the way the lighting's done, you don't get that kind of continuous, reflection of what's the sun.
So that, I assume that's O scale, narrow gauge, O scale,
Yeah, it's an ON30 module.
So one thing that I find interesting, so I'm looking over your left shoulder. What I find particularly engaging, and I'm not sure how you did that, is the gravel road. I like that it's elevated in the center, so you can kind of see the ruts. It looks very natural. Don't know if you did that intentionally or if that was accidental. And then the transition from the gravel to the grass also looks very, very realistic. Again, because it's not a sharp edge, right, between
Right.
these dirt roads. So I particularly like how you did that transition. I'm wondering if you did anything special to do that, or because it looks fantastic.
No, it was just using different colors of grass as you started by the road, assuming, and then moved back to being more green. Hang on, let me
Okay.
see here. Somewhere I've got a to put a couple of.
Phil has modules like this. They all look this good.
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so this is kind of, what it kind of looks like with. So it was really, I wanted to build, this was the Banta stockyard, and I really wanted to build that. But yeah, it came out pretty cool.
It does look great.
Yeah, this was the one we're trying to get that reflection of the windshield in the vehicle there. I think that's the one that you saw there behind me, is that one maybe.
Yep.
So yeah, and then the other one, that's the other module, if we're going to show that typically take, is this one, which is, this is the Mission Hill Tunnel in Santa Cruz. But this is really if you go to the south portal, which is as you come from Fenton down running to Santa Cruz, if you look at the portal, it kind of looks like this with the church up above it. And then the other end of the tunnel looks much more like this. This is where the station used to be when it was, at one point, the Santa Cruz Depot was there, and then they took it out and they made a whistle stop called the Park Street Whistle Stop. So that was my imagineering of a Park Street whistle stop, little booth there. So anyway, that's another module. This is kind of my migration to trying to make more prototypically accurate models.
Well, you're doing a good job. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
I just like how it looks. I could use the excuse that you're using the larger O scale, but that's just that's just wishful thinking on my part. Trying to.
It is a great excuse. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to do great detail in O scale. It's a lot harder, and it's so interesting because our hobby is a trade-off of these kind of two lines, right? Which is, one line is how much detail can you have, and as your scale goes up, that line goes up. And then the other line is how much area can you model, and as you get larger, that line goes down. And so there's this interesting compromise, and it kind of, if you look at the model scales from say G at one end, because live steam and that, I'd argue, is a different beast altogether. But you look at things you can model in an indoor reasonable space from G scale to Z, what you kind of realize is when you draw those lines that HO is kind of right in the middle. I think it's why HO is so popular, because it's this kind of trade-off where if you go to, and I think S is then kind of the same. Get to O, it's clearly more of a detail versus scale of modeling trade-off. So I think as you pick your scale, that's an interesting thought to think about, which is, what are you interested in modeling? And then of course that drives very quickly into ERA, because clearly, if you want to model in O, I think it's why something like ON30 is so popular. If you want to model in O because you want the detail, then you're immediately driven to an era that had shorter trains, and therefore you can have shorter sidings that are comparable to an HO siding that you can put 20 or 30 cars in. You can only have 8 or 10 in an ON30.
And curve radius.
And curve radius and everything else. It's interesting. We did a thing on Thursday night. We do this thing called the Modeling Lifestyle that's part of the New Tracks thing. And we had Tom York on. And it's interesting to watch him going from being an O modeler. Now everything he's doing in modeling is in GN15. And so, which is basically, HO ON30 track, but with G scale models. And so, it's an interesting, that's kind of, to me, that's that end goal of going to where you're really focused on detail much more than how much of an area you can model in a given space. And by the way, he's modeling Cuban sugar trains, which are a combination of being incredibly antiquated and incredibly tiny. Like the little locomotives and stuff he showed were pretty amazing. It was
a Porter would be too big.
Oh yeah, no, the Porter would be over the top. So hang on, let me I'll pull one up of some of those images he had they were really pretty cool actually.
With a flat car with a steam engine on it.
Yeah, exactly. It's well, this is. Let me see if I can. Problem is, I had to go find it. So, yeah, these were.
Oh my!
Wow.
So. And like this, I think this was a Taiwanese diesel prototype, and this was a fueling station. Some cars. Yeah, you somebody said a flatbed with a motor on it. There it is. Yeah, it was actually pretty interesting going through with him and seeing kind of a lot of the things he'd done through the years. That was especially in the GN30 side of things. So yeah, here's another example. I think this was actually this was a Porter redone. Yeah, it's interesting to watch it. If you ever looked at building a Tom York kit or that, he's also doing I think it's going to be in March of next year, March or April sometime. He's going to do a build along. He's doing a new kit, and going to do a build along and walk through it. The thing that's amazing is he basically does all of his rust and stuff just by painting and using washes and painting. So it's a pretty interesting kind of view if you look at and this is where like you said, I feel really good about you guys feeling good about my modules, but this is kind of a humbling picture here. Wow. I mean, from a modeler's perspective, that's kind of pretty humbling. And that was actually that little locomotive we saw there before. And then, just pretty amazing kind of structures and kind of how they get built and look. And that was that Fix-It shop there. But yeah, there was
on the go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, on the other end of the scale, has anybody followed that email tree about the business card module scene? You build a whole scene on the side of a business card. Remember, several years ago, I proposed a 1 foot challenge for PCR, and there was about maybe a dozen people participated in one of the meets, and we built it on 1 foot square was the rule. But there was the email tree had the entire diorama, if you will, or scene on a business card. And I looked at that thing and I said, now that's fascinating. What can you do on something that is, that big? And I'm thinking maybe this might be one of these things to throw out for the, as a challenge for the next meet or something like that we do. Maybe not the December one, obviously, but
Right.
next time we're all together live, when we have models to show or something like that. It just struck me as so much, not that we don't have anything else to do, mind you.
Yeah, I think that was a discussion on one of the groups.ios, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
That was an interesting, very interesting thought process of what you can model on that. In G scale, it becomes very interesting.
Well, all you need is one rail.
That's right, a rail and some refuse on the side. But yeah, it's all very interesting. So
Back around 2000, I was doing some stuff in FN3, and it was fascinating what you could do. I built this North Pacific Coast milk car that must have been yay long, and it was a Carter Brothers all wood construction, and I went a little bit overboard and used brass rod for the tension rods, but threaded them and actually created bolts to tighten and create a slight camber in the frame.
Way too much free time.
I don't know how I did this, because at the time I was a consultant and I was traveling around the country and
Do you remember Pat LaTorres once showed the back end of a passenger car that he was working on? I remember that. And the thing was like that big, and it was just, I don't know what scale it was in, but he was modeling it down to the fabric and the little rivets, I think, on the back of the seat. And it was only a section of the car, obviously. But you're right, when you get big, it's a blessing and a curse.
I'm back in HO again.
Actually, so am I.
Yeah.
Well, or eventually you get to 1-to-1, and then it's just called restoration.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
So I have a question. I'm reluctant to ask this question, again, revealing my total lack of skills, because I'm kind of stymied working with, I'm working on, you can see in my background, a CN Jeep 9. And if you go back far enough, you can see the intricate painting, right? The lines, they had heralds and crests that had fine lines. And I've tried to decal this. I've gone through 8 sets of decals and I cannot get them to sit correctly over all of the obstructions, right? The ridges around the bevels around the number pods and so on. So then it was suggested that, well, if the decals don't work, to paint. And now, so I've got to paint a scale, 3/4 inch stripe, right? How the hell does anybody paint those things? And I'm wondering, there must be somebody who does it, and I just need to find someone who's got the skill to do it, or there's a trick that I don't know about. But I'm stymied by, because that's part of the problem with working in HO. So some of these details are, if you measure them, like a 1-inch pinstripe. All right, how do you get that? A decal is too narrow, too thin, you can't work it. And how do you get I suppose you could do it freehand, but I don't have that kind of skill. Is there a trick to doing this?
Is it a straight line?
No, it's curved. It's a compound line. A straight line I could do with a rule and a very, very fine brush, but they are compound lines. They come down and they curve and they end up in a point. Very, 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 very tricky. Actually, you can't really see it. I'm hiding my picture, but if you go down, towards the tip here, these aren't so bad. I can get those with the decals, but trying to get the decals to go over the bezels that are the number boards does just require an infinite amount of patience to just keep trying to move the decal together? Or someone told me, forget it, it's just too hard to do, you're gonna have to paint it. And I'm just curious to know if there's some expert painters here in the group that say, yes, here's a technique that you could try. I tried masking, and that didn't work. So I'm running out of options. Well, okay. There
Yeah,
are
I don't know.
no expert painters, huh? Because that's why I was looking, Phil, at both the green truck and the boxcar, looking to see if those were decaled or they were painted, or for example, I'm looking at the bumper on the truck, you know, looking at the detail, it seems to be bent all of the right. It seems to be, I don't know if that was painted or if it came out of the box that way, but
All right. Just came out of the box that way. And the boxcar is just a Bachman boxcar painted from factory painted.
okay.
So yeah.
Well, I know that. Oh, go ahead.
I know I gotta go.
Oh, I thought you had an answer to my question. Okay.
No, I don't. I wish I did.
Okay. Well, that's cool. I'll just keep experimenting and see if I can come up with a solution. But I appreciate any feedback somebody might have.
Yeah, I don't know if dry transfers would be better. If it's hard to get a decaldescent, it's probably really hard to get a dry transfer press down in as well.
Well, what do people do? I mean, how do you apply decal over all of those, you know, extrusions? Do you just set it down and work it with a fine brush and hope that it eventually dries and wraps around the rivet heads and all the other details? Is that the technique? And I'm just not patient enough.
That's all I do, but I'm not the one to answer this.
Okay.
Yeah. Not my expertise.
Not my skill set.
Yeah, well, not mine either, apparently. So there we go. All right, guys, thanks.
So
I stick to box cars, flat-sided.
Well, you were doing the board and batten, weren't you? Weren't you, Ken? Were you doing the board and batten blacksmith shop? Was that you earlier in the meeting doing that? Because that's not you were scribing the I thought you were scribing the grooves on the board and batten. Oh, maybe it was somebody else who was doing that. I thought it was you.
No, it was him.
Yeah. So I thought you were doing the scribing on the to get the board and batten widths the right width on the styrene.
You know, in terms of siding, I find of all things that brush painting for buildings, for structures generally, it gives you a texture when you brush paint, and there's just a little bit of light and dark that gives you almost instant weathering of age, as opposed to when you airbrush it, it's fresh out of the box type of look. Yeah.
You're saying the airbrush gives you kind of too sharp a transition between colors?
Structures, yeah, they can.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
This is entirely brush painted. Well, okay, I'll take it back. I did a primer coat from a spray can, my usual Tamiya primer. But after that, everything was brush painted. As a matter of fact, the red on this is a barn red color from craft paint.
Yeah,
just a regular powder.
I have a whole box of those itty bitty things. Thank you, Joanne's.
Yes.
I have to go. It's the big hand is this way and the little hand is that way, and I have to chug on. So everyone have a wonderful week, and with any sort of luck, I'll be in Hawaii next time, so I won't see you. Ha. Take care, all.
Thanks.
Well, you have a good one. Enjoy. Thanks. Well, everyone, I think it's probably that was good. I did notice Al put in a note that, and I didn't realize that Bruce Feld had passed away. And so, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Al. I appreciate it. So maybe I'll try to note next time I send an email out as well.
Bill, I'd like to somehow get a way to practice putting a presentation that's in a PowerPoint type software
Yep.
and doing that, you know, sometime maybe before next meeting or something like that, so I can just get the moves down correctly.
Super. Yeah, sure. No worries. I mean, if you want to, we can do it now, or you can call me. We can set up a separate little video call and just do it separately sometime during the week.
I just maybe sometime separate during the week.
Okay.
We'll figure out a time. You're available. I'm retired. I have no whatever your time you have available.
I'm pretty much retired. I
Yeah.
kind of wrote it off after
Okay.
kind of going in, and then I got COVID, and that convinced me I really should call it. So that was the becoming part of the problem now. I keep reading that the demographic problem is we're all retiring. We're supposed to still keep working and consuming. We're not being good citizens because we're not working hard and making a lot of money and consuming as much as we should.
Look,
Basically,
I'm almost 79. I feel I finally earned it.
I saw this guy talking about the demographics of spending and when countries go through the point where essentially the baby boom bubble goes through the spending curve and drops off spending. And this guy actually could tell you basically when people spent the most money on every different kind of thing. You know, for example, I think he said that the average person buys the most milk at 42 years of age, because that's when your kids are 14, and male sons drink the most milk on average in the demographics. It was a pretty amazing set of data that he had about, you know, and he kind of applied that and said you can do a lot of predictors about what's going to happen in the economy. And of course, the argument is that we're all now conserving, not spending, where we used to spend heavily, you know, 10, 15 years ago when you had kids and you were, you know, all that. Now we're just not doing that. So just very interesting.
Now I spend it on the dentist instead.
Well, I have to say, after having, I don't know if it's really long COVID or if it's just lung issues, but the COVID ended up giving me a lot of lung irritation. I've had 2 bouts of getting not so much sick, but just having a lot of lung, you know, gunk in your throat and that, you know, bronchial issues and that. And they gave me this thing called Flovet, and it's $400 for basically a 30-day prescription of this little inhaler thing. So what I realized is you no longer spend money on things that are enjoyable. You spend it on these absurd medicines. So, but it actually seems to be doing a good job. So maybe it's worth it. Who knows?
Phil, this is Al. I have a photograph on my desktop that I want to share. How do I do that?
So if you look in Zoom, there's a thing that says share screen. It's the green thing with an up arrow on it.
Yeah.
Click on that, and that'll open a window, and there's a bunch of pictures in that window. Those are all the video images that are in your computer, because every application generates a video output, and that becomes the upper left that typically says screen 1 is actually your screen.
All right.
And so if you click on that and click share, we see your screen, and that's the best way to know that what you're seeing is what we're seeing. The problem is if you go share other stuff, if you don't know what you're doing, it's really easy to get lost, and you're looking at something you think we're looking at something else. So if you want to do that, just click on upper left, click on that, and then just click share down at the bottom right on that window. There you go.
Okay. And then
now
I click on the scene that I want.
Now whatever you put on your screen, we're going to see. Yep. So now if you make that full size, we are seeing it. Yep.
Perfect.
And if you want to make it full screen, if you see that little about a third of the way from the right, there's that double arrow that's kind of at an angle. Click on that, and that'll make it full screen. Yeah. Now you kind of went through some different images there, but yep. So we're seeing all those images that you're seeing. Cool. There you go. So basically that's what you do to, yeah, to share. Is that HO also?
You muted yourself, Al.
Al, I think you're muted. And you'll have to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you. Al, you're muted. What if he lost his audio?
That's a nice scene, no?
Cool. That's really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is what I've got to practice. However, I think that one of the things to do is to plan ahead and be sure that you have a link to the file folder that you're going to show your photos in. The photos, you get it all winnowed down. You stage it all ready with just the photos you want to see, and you can link directly to that file folder.
Yeah. You know, what I end up doing is, because I have PowerPoint. So go over to Zoom there, click there, move up where it says, click on the one that says meeting controls right above that. Go click there, click on that thing that says meeting controls, click on that window. Move up, move your pointer up and click on the one that says meeting controls. That one, click on that. I think you stopped sharing actually.
Your audio's back.
I clicked the unmute.
Okay. Yeah, you know, you're still sharing. We just lost the picture was all. Yeah, that's quite frankly why I put things into PowerPoint, is because you're able to view them much more effectively.
Well, what that was is what are you hearing me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a spud barge. I have a harbor scene on my layout, and having a dredging barge is a handy thing to have because you know, you want to keep the water depth to a point where you're not the large vessels aren't grounding themselves. So I've researched the spud barge, and it's kind of an interesting, those two long poles that you saw sticking up out of it are called spuds, and they are used to anchor the barge in position when the barge is doing its dredging operation. These barges typically are only used in fairly shallow areas. I mean, that's why they're used in the first place. And I thought it'd be fascinating to model one of these things just to put on my waterfront scene.
Cool.
Interestingly, I spent some time back in the 80s working for Crowley Maritime, and got to witness the operations at Seattle for loading railroad cars onto barges to go to Alaska, and later got to visit Whittier, Alaska, where they unloaded or reloaded the empties. It was interesting to watch. Well, I think I'm done for tonight, for this morning, rather.
For this morning, I think I am too.
I just wanted to thanks, Phil, for putting these on every couple of weeks. These are really great. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, hopefully in 2 weeks, like I said, we'll have Earl recapping his clinic about the work he did on Seth's layout, and
I know,
that'll
it'd
be a
be
little
great
bit
to
of
see it,
fun.
but unfortunately, those always intersect with the op session I do down in Watsonville with Dave Lovelace, so.
Well, you can always watch them on you
Yeah.
can always watch them on eBay.
Yeah, I'll
Or on
watch them
YouTube.
offline.
Cool.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, everyone, have a good one. We will talk to you in a couple of weeks. And remember, mark your calendars for December 4th. Bye now.
Bye-bye.